Altorf, German, Altdorf, is a commune in the Bas-Rhin department in the Grand Est region of northeastern France. The inhabitants of the commune are known as Altorfois or Altorfoises. The commune has been awarded one flower by the National Council of Towns and Villages in Bloom in the competition of cities and villages in bloom. A part of the canton of Molsheim and also its arrondissement, Altdorf is located about 15 kilometers west of Strasbourg. The A352 national highway runs from east to west across the southern portion of the commune but has no exit. Access to the commune is by Road D392, which runs parallel but north of the highway and connects with Highway Exit 8 to the east of the commune and west to Dorlisheim. Another access road is the D127, which comes from Jagerhof just over the northern border, and where there is a railway station, south to the village, then continuing south to Griechi and Presmolsheim. There are also a number of small country roads covering the commune. Most of the commune is farmland with some forests in the northeastern portion. The Bras de la Brux flows through the commune from west to east, through the village, then east to join the Mulebach, and flows east under the name Altorfois until it joins La Broche River north of Einsheim Airport. In the northeast, another waterway forms the northeastern border of the commune. The only other hamlet in the commune is that of Firstoff, northeast of Altdorf village. It was known as Altum Coenobium in 787. The origin of the commune name Altorf is from the form Altdorf, Old Town. The old spelling was still visible before the Second World War. However, the spelling Altdorf through Altorfium/Altorfium, related to Altum Coenobium, it is more likely to come from the Latin root altum. Climate in this area has mild differences between highs and lows, and there is adequate rainfall year-round. The Köppen climate classification subtype for this climate is CFB, Marine West Coast climate/Oceanic climate. Altdorf is located on the ancient Roman Via Romana or Bergstrasse, which connected Strasbourg to the strategic pass of Donan. The funerary steles of the 3rd century attest to a Roman presence. Quickly, the village's history became intertwined with that of its Benedictine Abbey, which was founded in 960 by Hugues III of Eguisheim, called Ellenrogue, Raucus, Count of Nordgau, and his wife Countess Hewald. His father, Count Eberhard IV, was buried in the abbey in 972, sealing the connection between the family and Altdorf. The abbey head was built following a Cenobite community of monks called the Altum Coenobium, which was reported in 787, where the name of the abbey and village came from. Pope Leo IX, son of the powerful empire family of Eguisheim-Dabo, came to Altdorf in 1049 to honor his ancestors. He consecrated an altar to Saint Cyriac in 1079 and endowed it with relics, an arm of the saint, the remains of Santa Maria Violata from Rome. The reliquary in Oriental style represents a bust in polychrome wood and with the words Notatio Alterfensis as one of the major parts of the abbey, second part of the 12th century. Cyriac of Naliga, who had cured epilepsy of the daughter of the Emperor Diocletian in the 4th century, became the patron saint of the village, and he is celebrated on August 8. Altdorf was a place of pilgrimage for epileptics and people possessed with demons, with many healings reported in the abbey archives in the 13th century. The chapel was consecrated in 974, under the leadership of Mayul, Bishop of Cluny, and Archibald, Bishop of Strasbourg. As with the abbeys of Stege and Marmoutier, the Altdorf Abbey was very successful because of its many dependencies. The churches of Berenbach and Grendelbruch, although relatively remote, were incorporated into the abbey by a papal bull of 1192 from Pope Celestine III, which involved in particular the attachment of tithes. In particular, its properties along the right bank of the Broche, extending from the course of the Rhode into the plain of Alsace, were attached to the bishopric of Strasbourg in 1226, extinguishing the line of Eguisheim. In addition, the emperors gave the abbey the right to issue currency of Saint Cyriac, from the Etonian revival at the end of the 10th century. The Holy Roman Emperor Frederick Barbarossa explicitly recognized this right with a charter in 1153. In the 13th century, however, this privilege was transferred to Dachstein, then Molsheim. The cultural influence of the abbey led to the establishment of a university, not to be confused with that of Altdorf near Nuremberg, which was subsequently transferred to Molsheim in the Carthusian heartland, there to be moved aside to form the University of Strasbourg. Economic and cultural power caused the shedding blood in Altdorf in 1262 when the village and monastery were burned by the Strasbourgers, who were in revolt against Bishop Walter de Geroldsek. In 1525 there was the Peasant Revolt, which sacked the abbey, German Peasants' War. Finally, a century later, during the 30 Years' War, which included Swedish and French forces. In 1606, Altorf Abbey joined the Union of Bursfeld, which included 100 Benedictine monasteries and was in 1624 formally called the Benedictine Congregation of Strasbourg, covering the abbeys of Ebersmunster and Marmoutier in Alsace, as well as of Edenheim-Munster, Gengenbach, Schuttend, and Schwarzbach in Baden. The peasants' epic struggle, the Bundschuh or Deutscher Bauernkrieg, which had partly originated from the Holy Roman Empire in 1524, crystallized in Lower Alsace around Altorf, Dorlisheim, and Morsch. The leaders of the movement were Erasmus Gruber and Georg Edel, respectively from Molsheim and Rosheim, established themselves with a group of 1,500 men at their headquarters in Altorf, from where the contagion spread throughout the province in a week, with their troops raiding monasteries and mistreating Jews. Father Nartz reported these events in his monograph of 1887. From the first days of April, the Schultheiss of Rosheim, Edel stood, with 2 townsfolk of Molsheim, at the head of the movement in the countryside. In a few days he had assembled a strong band of farmers of 1,500 men. From this number he chose messengers responsible to scour the area, calling for men to convene on the plain of Altorf during the week of Easter. They then, armed with clubs, decided to finish with the nobility and clergymen. One group, consisting of countrymen from Epfig and Dambach, seized Ebersmunster and settled there. The second group was recruited closer to us. They gathered in the Valdeville of Scherwiller at Salas and plundered the monastery of Honcourt and stole everything they could. The revolt was put down a few weeks later, on 20th May 1525 near Saverne, by Duke Antoine de Lorraine with 18,000 of the insurgents dead. The 30 Years' War originated in Bohemia with the defenestration of Prague, 1618. It spread like wildfire from 1620 through the entire Holy Roman Empire. On this occasion, Swedish troops led by Marshal Gustav Horn were stationed in the village in the autumn of 1632. Engaged by the Swedish King Gustavus Adolphus in the European politico-religious conflict in support of the German Protestant princes, they practiced a policy of terror against Catholics in the region. The peasants fled at the cry of Der Schwede kommt, the Swedes are coming, terrified by the Swedish torture or Schwedentrunk, which consisted of ingesting manure to suffocation. The population of Altorf were almost exclusively Catholic at the time and so suffered from this presence as did Molsheim and Mutzig, which was sacked in November 1632 with the help of Protestants in the neighboring village of Dorlisheim, who put ladders at the disposal of the Swedes to scale the ramparts. In this regard, Altorf constituted an anchor point in the reconquest of the Catholic Counter-Reformation, a reconquest which had been prepared by opening a college of Jesuits in Molsheim in 1580. The style and decoration of the church are particularly characteristic, very similar to those that can be seen in other Habsburg lands, Vienna and Prague in particular. The epitaph of the abbot Mattern recounts success in 1686 in bringing the inhabitants of the commune of Dudelnheim to the Roman Church by making them leave the Luther sect. This period of the war was difficult for the population, judging by the fact that the wealthy abbey had to pledge the abbey cross in 1637, which it was able to recover only 20 years later. The human toll of the 30 Years' War for Altorf, and more generally for Alsace, was very severe. This was compounded by the resilience of the plague and famine due to the harsh winters of the Little Ice Age. The demographic impact was probably comparable to that of other regions of the Holy Roman Empire, such as Württemberg, who lost 80% of its population at the same time. In 1791, the abbey was dissolved by the revolutionaries and the 13 Benedictine monks were forced to leave. Father Cyriacus Spitz became the last in a succession of abbots over 800 years. The Romanesque tympanum over the main door was destroyed and was replaced in 1886 by the sculptor Eugen Duck. All the buildings constituting the abbey with its outbuildings were razed in the 19th century except for the wing of the abbey who has recently been the presbytery office. The abbey and its outbuildings have been rebuilt several times, including in 1180 with the construction of a new abbey which followed the first work commissioned in 1133 by Father Auden. The most notable works are those of the convent buildings and transept from 1715 by the Austrian Baroque master Peter Thumb, the construction of the organ by André Silbermann in 1723, and, from 1985 to 1991, a complete restoration under the supervision of the parson Henry Host. The church was protected as a historical monument in 1932, registered in 1937, and gazetted in 1983. In 2000, the lintel of the door of the village, Klostertor, which was damaged in 1965, was restored. In 2001, the tithe barn, Zentelskir, was transformed into a library. In 2004, the abbey gardens, Hortus, Herbarium, Pomarium, were restored, equipped, and opened to the public. List of successive mayors of Altorf. Mayors from 1942, not all data is known. In 2009 the commune had 1,242 inhabitants. The evolution of the number of inhabitants is known through the population censuses conducted in the town since 1793. From the 21st century, a census of municipalities with fewer than 10,000 inhabitants is held every 5 years, unlike larger towns that have a sample surveyed every year. The commune has a number of buildings and structures that are registered as historical monuments. A farmhouse at 4 Rue de Meuniers, 1787. A farmhouse at 7 Rue de Meuniers, 19th century. The town hall/school at 12 Rue Principale, 1869. The town hall contains a boundary stone, 1764, which is registered as an historical object. A farmhouse at 16 Rue Principale, 18th century. A farmhouse at 27 Rue Principale, 1797. A guardhouse at 29 Rue Principale, 18th century, formerly the watchtub. A well at 41 Rue Principale, 1617. A tannery at 56 Rue Principale, 1845. A public bench at RD 127, 1863. A well at Place Saint-Cyriac, 1600. A farmhouse at 3 Place Saint-Cyriac, 17th century. A farmhouse at 5 Rue de Strasbourg, 1843. The farm contains a high-relief, Trinity and Virgin, 1843, that is registered as an historical object. A mansion at Jagerhof, 18th century. Houses and farms, 17th to 20th century. The commune has several religious buildings and structures that are registered as historical monuments. The chapel at Rue de la Chapelle, 1846. The chapel contains 2 items that are registered as historical objects. Movable items and monuments of secondary interest. A set of 2 paintings, 1869. The Benedictine Abbey tithe barn at 10 Cours de Lodgings, 1749, now converted into a library. The Benedictine Abbey mill and farm at Cours de Lodgings, 1749. An abbey at Place Saint-Cyriac, 12th century. The Benedictine Abbey well at Place Saint-Cyriac, 1739. The Church of Saint-Cyriac at Place Saint-Cyriac, 1725. The church contains a very large number of items that are registered as historical objects. For a complete list with links to descriptions, in French, click here. The Benedictine Abbey at Place Saint-Cyriac, 10th century. The abbey contains 2 items that are registered as historical objects. Movable items and monuments of secondary interest. A bas-relief, head of an abbot, 1568. The Benedictine Abbey gatehouse at 5 Place Saint-Cyriac, 1663. The Benedictine Abbey lodgings at 6 Place Saint-Cyriac, 1708. The lodgings contain several items that are registered as historical objects. A cabinet, 1, 18th century. A cabinet, 2, 18th century. A corbel, 17th century. A cabinet, 3, 18th century. A funeral structure, Iron Age. This Benedictine church was founded in 960 by Hugh III of Eguisheim, was rebuilt in the 12th century, then again in the 17th century after a fire, and, more significantly, in the 18th century. The church is unique and majestic through a combination of a Romanesque triple nave with sides in cut stone, 17th century, in one part in Baroque elements, Baroque in the other part with the choir and transept in masonry and stone from the first quarter of the 18th century. The center is topped by an octagonal bell tower made of wood and covered with slated wood scale. It was destroyed in the Second World War and rebuilt afterwards. The Baroque Reconstruction commissioned by Abbot Amand Zimmermann, was conducted by the Austrian master Peter Thum in 1715 for the convent buildings and 1724 for the choir and transept. The wing of the abbey, the current presbytery, was made in 1707 by Albert Regitz d'Aubernay. These works were completed in 1727 with stucco decor, a marble altar with carved figures depicting a miraculous cure of Saint Cyriac, imposing oak stalls, and then an organ in 1730. The organ was originally commissioned by the Franciscans of Saarburg from the famous organ builder André Silbermann from Saxony but was finally acquired by the Abbey of Altdorf and harmoniously complements the Baroque surroundings. The porter's house guarding the entrance to the tithe barn is part of the church and the rectory of the few elements of the abbey that still exist today. The cloister, the house, and the outbuildings were destroyed during the French Revolution and in the 19th century. The church formerly contained the tombs of the Devo ancestors of Pope Leo IX and the House of Lorraine. Many other objects, altar, chalice, etc., are included in the Palissy database and protected as such. The church has in its inventory a tombstone bearing the image of the monk Conrad de Guggenheim, steward of the abbey in the middle of the 14th century. He was in charge of the finances of the convent but also conducted religious affairs. The tombstone depicts the deceased standing between two small columns surmounted with a flowered bracket. He holds in his hand a book while his feet stand on a dog. Made of Vosges pink sandstone. After a few years outside the walls of the St. Cyriac Abbey, the well was returned to its original place in 1739 in the gardens of the abbey on the occasion of their opening to the public. Situated in the locality of Ganswide, the menhir or standing stones mark the boundary of the village from their 40-meter height. They probably date back to before Celtic settlement of the region. The coat of arms of the village is visible halfway up, a late sculpture. Registered on May 20, 1930 as a historical monument. The cloister's gardens were opened to the public in 2004. The journey through the pomarium, garden cemetery, the herbularias, herb garden, and the hortus, vegetable garden, testifies to the high level of organization of Benedictine monastic life according to the rule of Saint Benedict Ora et labora, prayer and work. P. Magnus Sadler, Geschichte der Benediktiner Abtei von Altdorf, Strasbourg Bauer, 1887, in German. Abbé Nards, Val de Ville, Its Origins in the 17th Century, Editions Loris, 1887, in French. Archange Seifert, Altdorf, Geschichte von Abtei und Dorf, Königshofen St. Fideli, 1950, in German. Gunther Metken, St. Cyriacus in Altdorf, Editions Schnellus Steiner Verlag, 1966. Henry Host, Catholic Parish Church, former Benedictine Abbey of St. Cyriac at Altorf, Editions Schnellus und Steiner, 1981, in French. Philippe Dollinger, Raymond Oberle, History of Alsace, From Prehistory to Today, Editions SAIP, 1985, in French. Jean Voigt, Property Owners, Entrepreneurs, and Heads of the Village at Altdorf at the Beginning of the 19th Century, 1986, in French. E. Fridge, Church of St. Cyriac at Altdorf, former Benedictine Abbey, Editions du Cygne, 2004, in French. Charles Walther, The 30 Years' War in Alsace, Société d'Histoire d'Archéologie du Rhode Nord, 2006, in French.